Welcome to Emotional Resilience, Living with the Fruit of the Spirit. I'm your host and author, Ron Ovid. We're doing a series now on habits. And last time, as I introduced that, I said, well, why are we doing habits? Well, we're doing habits because positive habits can help us emotionally, right? Negative habits can really bring us down emotionally. And a lot of our emotional resilience that we need is due to habits. In fact, some of our emotional reactions are habitual. Have you ever noticed that? A lot of times we can, it's easy to get angry. It's easy to, feel sad. We can get into a habit. I remember decades ago, when I read a book, Happiness is a Choice. It got me to thinking when I was deep in my anxiety, is anxiety a choice? And I've been able to study that over the years, and choice has a lot to do with our emotions, and so habits are important. And so we started going over last time the three parts of a habit, and we talked about the cue, the behavior, and the reward. And we also called it the stimulus, the response, the benefit, or the gain. What are we gaining, right? And we talked about changing, working with the three different parts. And today I want to kind of go over deeper into working with the triggers. What is it that's triggering us? And I want you to be your own detective. I want you to be able to look and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I reacting? What went on? What happened? Because that's going to be important. It's going to be important. We want to work with the trigger or the cue or the stimulus, whatever word you want to use. Something happens and here we go, right? And we want to work with that. It can be a key to changing our habit. The trouble is that we're so programmed, we often go right into the behavior and we never stop to think of what happened, right? And so, like I said, you want to be your own detective, because with awareness and with thought and reflection, you can often get in touch with what was bothering you. And so if you do, we want to change the trigger if we can, right? It gets us going. It's what gets the brain to start kicking in the dopamine. I got to have it. And we want to be able to change that. And so there's different ways we can. One is that we can deny the legitimacy of the cue. If possible, one way to change a habit is to deny the fact that it's a legitimate need, a legitimate desire. For example, many of us face shame-based fear and have habits or addictions because of the shame we feel. And the shame is based a lot of times on lies. I'm broken. I'm no good. Now you may think mother never loved me, and maybe that's true. It happens sometimes. But never, but let's say that's the case. But that still doesn't have to define you. To say mother never loved me, therefore it's my fault, I'm broken, I'm no good, and that's how children think. That's the lie, you see. God didn't create you that way. He didn't create you as no good. You're the apple of his eye. He created you a masterpiece. And so we want to deny sometimes that this is coming from a lie. This is not legitimate. It's faulty wiring. It's a false alarm. And it's important. Now, an alarm alarms us, right? If an alarm was real soft, it wouldn't alarm us at all. But when it's when it's an alarm, it gets our attention. And you can be in a building and that fire alarm goes off and you start heading for the doors, even if you don't smell smoke. But what happens if you're sitting there and 5 times in a row it goes off, interrupts your whole meeting, there's no smoke, nothing going on? Pretty soon you're going to say, boy, someone's got to fix this. This is a false alarm. It's faulty wiring. And that's how we need to look at some of these things. The chances are, if you're overreacting to something, it's due to a false premise. It's an overactivation of the amygdala. The amygdala somehow is associated a certain look, a certain tone of voice with danger. Now, understand, a lot of these things come out of when we're a child. A 5-year-old has a right to feel, Dad's mad at me. They think, and their amygdala sits there and sees that look on the face, sees that stern look, hears that tone of voice, right? And it says, I better shape up. And they try to figure out why. Well, they have to be the reason why, you see. And that's where all those, and it's not a thought so much then, but it becomes a thought after a while. It becomes a thought, grows into a thought, and it's really a felt belief. And those are the things that we have to change, and it goes so quick. They're a felt belief. We feel them and we react, and we have to focus if we're going to really start catching on to what we're believing. And when we can do that, we can change. And it can help us if we just sometimes just jump to the conclusion that, hey, this is a false alarm. You know, Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz did that with OCD behavior. Now, you talk about something difficult to change. You know, when you got obsessional behavior going on, it's hard to change. And he said, first, you got to recognize the cue. You know, you got to sense it. You got to see it. You know, where is it? What's going on here? So you know it. You know, what's it feel like? Where is it in your body? Is it hot? Is it cold? I did that with stopping to bite my nails. When I was researching habits and that, I had gotten rid of a lot of habits, started some new ones, but I still bit my nails. And I bit my nails since I was a child. Never really knew how to stop it. People would say it was a nervous habit or something, but one day when I was doing the research and I said, you know, let me really focus on this. And what I realized is that there was a sensation here in the cuticles around there, right? And once that sensation had started bugging me, I couldn't think, and the only way I could get rid of it is by getting rid of that edge or something. But once you bite one, all of a sudden you're biting them all. It didn't make any logical sense, but I did recognize. And so once I did that, once I was able to do it, I said, well, let's change the behavior. And so I started going like this, right? Or, you know, rubbing on a table, and you know what? It went away. It took care of the sensations just like biting the nails did. And in one day, I stopped biting my nails. Now, I replaced the biting with, of course, taking care, you know, of the nails, clipping them and doing the emery boards and things, and just taking care of my nails. But if I had never realized what the sensation was, I would have never been able to fix that. And so it's important so we can have that emotional recognition, to give us time to regulate, and then, you know, be able to think about it. So now we're feeling bad, right? I can sense it. I can see my shoulders coming up. I feel tight. I feel kind of butterflies in the stomach, or, oh, my breath is short, and I'm going, okay, I'm upset. I'm fearful. I stop. I breathe. And number two is I rename it as a false alarm. You know what? This is just a false alarm. It's just a false alarm. I did that with panic attacks. And I've taught many people over the years, and they've gotten rid of panic attacks by being able to label it. If you can name it, you can tame it, right? And so we rename it as a false alarm. This is a false alarm. And then the third thing is you affirm that you don't have to obey the alarm. You know, if it's a false alarm, you don't have to go. If the firemen came into this room because 5 times in a row the alarm went off and they said, you know, we've called the repairmen, they'll be here in the morning. If it goes off again, just don't worry about it. Well, you take it from an authority there. He's checked everything out. There's no fire. A couple minutes after he leaves, you just sit there and you turn it off. Now, chances are you probably smelt for smoke, right? Because that's the nature of an alarm, right? But you knew that it was a false alarm. You had it from an authority, right? And we have to know that a lot of these things, you know, the fact that, you know, I feel like I'm going to die. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die if he's mad at me. I'm not going to die if I flunk the test. Now, do I want to? No. I'm not going to die if someone doesn't like me. You see, those kind of things that scare us so bad. We're not going to die. We're not going to die. It's a false alarm, and we don't have to buy it. You know, how about this one? I've done this before, and I can do it now. I've rode the wave. I've been through this before. I can do it again. That's a good one. Or, I don't want to be that person. Let's say you're tempted with something that you shouldn't watch, maybe on the computer. You know, I don't want to be that guy. Now, I've been doing that, but I don't want to be that guy. And so there's a lot of things you can say to yourself that will help you know that, hey, it's a false alarm. I don't have to do it, okay? I'm not going to die. I don't want to be that guy. You know, I've done it before. I can do it again. And then you distract yourself, you know, or you can contain it, either one. You know, you know it's coming. You feel the sensation. And I like riding the wave. You know, I like riding the wave. You know, the worst impulse, right, craving and that, the worst lasts only about 20 minutes. So, I mean, we can ride the wave. And if we distract ourselves, we know that, hey, if it comes, I'm going to get up, push the chair back, get up and go to another room. Or I'm going to get up, I'm going to take a walk. Or I'm going to call a friend. You know, I got a book I'm going to read. Whatever it takes, because why? You're retraining the brain. Do you know it takes 10,000, you know, repetitions to get a well-worn pathway. And so, you know, we don't necessarily need 10,000 to recorrect, but it's going to take time to really build a strong new network. It's not going to happen just necessarily in 1 or 2 times. We want to continue to build it, right? We want to continue to build that new neuronal pathway, if you will, and extinguish the other. And we do that by, you know, riding the wave. Riding the wave. What goes up comes down. Another way is to contain it. And that is, you know, you can feel it. And, you know, one way they do it, you can put your fingers under the armpit and the other hands on your shoulder, and you just, you know, you hold it and you feel it. Come up and go down. You know, I often think of Wile E. Coyote, right, and the Roadrunner. The cartoons were all the same, right? He'd see the Roadrunner and he'd wait and try to trap him, and it's usually with dynamite or something. He wanted to explode him, and the Roadrunner would come along, beep, beep, right? And he'd be going and he'd blow right past it. And so, you know, Wile E. Coyote would take, and what would he do? He'd take the dynamite, swallow it, and all of a sudden, boom, his stomach would go out and come back and poof, blow out some smoke. Well, that's a cartoon, I get it. But that's sometimes what it is. Riding the wave, containing it, sensing it, and just letting it dissipate into your body. I'm not going to die. You're breathing, right? You're regulating it. You can add prayer to that. Lord, help me just ride the wave. Help me contain this, Lord. Lord, I know it's just a false alarm. I give it to you. He says, cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. Lord, I give this back. All those kind of things can help you contain it, can help you do that, okay? Now, you think you can't do it? I want to challenge you. You already have. You know how to contain things. It's called delay of gratification, right? You've been able to delay gratification in the past. You want something, but you have to wait. You've been able to do it even though it hurt. How about having to go to the lavatory, right? Sometimes you want to go, and then, you know, you're driving down the road and the next rest area or the exit isn't for 5 miles. You've been able to contain it and hold it, right? And, you know, how about you're working and you hit your hand or you bump your leg and you go, oh, man. But then you keep going, right? And pretty soon you're focused back on the job, and if you're like me, you see bruises later, go, how did I get that? But you were able to contain the pain and move on. And you know, there's a lot of examples where we've been able to tough it through, go it through, and this is similar. We can do this. Millions of people have been able to overcome habits, have been able to add new ones, and you can do it too. And then I think sometimes we need to, we deny the legitimacy, we rename it, right, as a false alarm. We don't have to listen to it, and then we, distract ourselves, we contain it, we ride the wave, we distract ourselves by, going somewhere else, walking out of the room, talking to someone, whatever it is we need to do, and that time goes by. And then sometimes I think we need to link the consequences with the behavior. And it's been interesting, a lot of people haven't done that. There was a study going on and with EMDR, which is a method that they do with bilateral stimulation that works well with post-traumatic stress and that. And Laurel Parnell was working with addicts and Mark Grant as well with pain, and they were able to see that, hey, this bilateral stimulation can help. And what it is, they started with the eyes, where they would move the eyes, and they'd follow something back and forth. Then it turned into, you could, have senses in the hands that pulsated, right? One hand to the other. Or the tapping, and the tapping is pretty easy to do. When we walk, it's bilateral, right? and have you ever done that? You had to walk it off, right? There's something about it here. And Mark Grant talks about it. He says bilateral stimulation is stimuli, visual, auditory, or tactical, whichever way, which occur in a rhythmic left-right pattern. For example, bilateral stimulation could involve watching a hand or a moving light back and forth. Audio is listening to sounds back and forth. Tapping, of course, is using the hands left to right. And the question is, what does it do? Well, bilateral stimulation is a core treatment of EMDR and a process which distinguishes it from other methods. It's been tested, it's been around for many, many years, and it's been used by thousands and thousands of therapists. While there's still a lot to learn about it, it has four main effects. One, a relaxing effect, including decreased physiological arousal. It has an increased attentional flexibility, meaning that your thoughts become less stuck on whatever's bothering you. 3, it has a distancing effect, meaning that the problem seems smaller and farther away. And 4, it decreases worry. And so, you can read the notes again on this, and I encourage you, if you don't have the notes, to write me at ron@empowerministry.org, and I'll be happy to send them to you. Well, we know that because of the tapping, and then this is called a bottom-up cascade. Bottom-up cascade in the brain means that they're experiencing the lower parts of the brain first. It's reading the sensations. It's coming from the lower part of the brain up into the thinking part of the brain. And it's the physiological response, right? And then it travels up, leading to mental changes, decreasing the worry. And it works because that's how the brain normally processes information. The effects are often experienced more quickly and easily than with top-down, just having an insight. And so that's how breathing works that way from the bottom up, right? And this is a similar thing. It works because there's an orienting reflex. It's simply a natural tendency for the nervous system to orient itself to a new stimuli. So when your nervous system is subject to all that worry, and then you introduce this bilateral stimulation. Now, this works great when you combine it with visualization and some of the other techniques that we've talked about. A peaceful place, right? A safe place. It works really great with that. So, when your nervous system is subject to that bilateral stimulation, your attention is naturally diverted to that. As a result, your attention being held captive by the bilateral stimulation, you start to feel more relaxed. This leads to changes in the way your memory of the problem is stored. And that's interesting. What got you into trouble in the first place is, let's say, dad's look of disappointment. Uh-oh, something's wrong. And so later on, you got a boss, he looks at you that way, and now you're all nervous and anxious. So I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to die, right? Well, that was an association. That look, trouble, right? And to a 5-year-old, you know, that's a big, big, big trouble. And so now we're 35, 40, and we're reacting like a 5-year-old, right? Well, what they're saying here is that bilateral stimulation then can cause you to have a non-associative learning, So it's stored as a non-associative learning, and it's changes in a response to a stimulus that does not involve associating the present stimulus with another one. So it's really kind of cool. And what was so interesting is that Laurel Parnell, she saw that when she was working with a cocaine addict, that somehow there wasn't an association, there wasn't a connection between doing the drugs and the consequences that were going to happen later, the trouble he'd get because he went out stealing or whatever it was, right? And I've seen that over and over and over again as I've worked with addicted people. You know, it's like there's this, you know, all of a sudden they don't think about it. They're just doing it. And there's this dissociation. I've had people say, Ron, I quit drinking. And all of a sudden one night, you know, I'm just thinking, and all of a sudden I'm at a bar and I got a drink in my hand. And they were dead serious. And what she found is that she could work with people and do this bilateral stimulation, have them go through the whole scene while they were triggered, what they were doing when they did it, what did they feel like after they did it, and then what were the consequences, and why they were doing the bilateral stimulation and visualizing the whole thing, including all the sensations involved in the trouble and the disappointment and the heartache that they brought. Now all of a sudden they linked the consequence with the behavior. And it really started changing. And I have that all in the notes. You can look at her protocol and how she did it in case that's something you're interested in. But what we're talking about here is that we can change the trigger. We can change the trigger. We can really, really start doing it. And then, you know, we change it. The second thing, we can extinguish it. We can extinguish it. Wouldn't that be great if we could just get rid of it? Well, we can. When we realize it's a lie, it's faulty wiring, right? We can come back and we can change it. We can change it. And we can just say, you know, I don't have to listen to this anymore. You know, what am I believing? When I get in touch with what am I believing? You know, when I can see that I'm feeling like I'm going to die because nobody likes me. Well, that's not true. You're not going to die. And yes, there are some people that like you. And that kind of lie that causes all that reaction, it's not true. And when we can start discovering what those lies are, and when we can start knowing the truth, it will help. You know, I have a book that I've written. I'll be happy to let you have it. You know, you can write me and, you know, I can tell you how to get it. But it's called, you know, Overcoming the Lies We Believe, parentheses, feel are true. You know, because it's really what we feel. The emotion causes us to react. And so a lot of times when we can get in touch with what's triggering us, the lie, then we can start going against that lie. We can come up with critical, you know, significant people that don't buy that about us. We can go to more mature, wiser self and counteract against that lie. Has there ever been a time when you did do good? What do you mean you're no good? I can't do anything right. Can you think of a time? Of course, right? Can you think of someone else that thinks you've done a fine job, that, hey, you know how to do things well? Of course. You can visualize that. And then, of course, the compassionate Christ. How much God loves us. How much He's compassionate, the Holy Spirit in us, right? And we can talk to Him, Jesus. Lord, what do you feel? Lord, am I really that broken? Am I irreparable? Am I really damaged goods? and you can talk to him and he'll talk to you. He'll affirm in your heart. The Holy Spirit will comfort you, and you know the truth. And you know what? The truth will set you free. And once you know it, once you start to get the truth, whether it's a trusted friend, whether it's, even a grandma that's already went to be with the Lord, you can visualize what she would say. What would you say to someone you love? You should be saying that to yourself, right? And once we get the truth, then we can relive it in our mind. We can start feeling what it feels like to believe that. And then finally, we can manage the cue. We can be our own change agent. And that means if there's certain things that we know that trigger us, get rid of them. Change the environment. Change the environment. Minimize the triggers. If it's people, we may have some choices to make. If it's places, we may have to stop going. If it's things, we may have to get rid of them or minimize their view, right? Put them out of view until we really start extinguishing the trigger. We may want to substitute, the trigger with something else, right? If it's sweets you're trying to get rid of, how about a non-sugar? Sugar, then how about a non-sugar substitute? And so we can kind of do that, and we can change our routines. And so there's a lot we can do to manage the cue and retrain our brain. So I invite you to look over these notes. Let's start working with the trigger, where we can change some of these habits that bring us down, where we can add new habits that will help us emotionally. God cares about our behavior, and he wants us to change those things that we need to, and he can help us, my friends. He will. As we look at the triggers and we start to either extinguish them, change them, manage them, whatever we need to do, he can help us then become the person that he wants us to be and change those habits that we need to.